and welcome to Heathen Hearth, the show where we cook recipes inspired by the historic and ethnographic imagination. This week we're making a hail and horn gathering recipe. We're making Thiazi's eyes. What you see here is me preparing the hazelnuts for the recipe. I'm heating them up in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit until they become fragrant. You do not want to cook them so long that they toast. For this recipe, it's important that they stay relatively white. After about 5 to 15 minutes, take them out and wrap them up in a moist kitchen cloth. Leave them to steam for about a minute, then rub them to remove their skins. Some of the nuts may need to go back in the oven for a bit to heat up again, and then you just repeat the process with those leftover nuts until all of them are relatively white. So this recipe only has 2 ingredients, hazelnuts and prunes. Make sure that you get what are called pitted prunes for this recipe. It's always confused me that prunes that have been de-pitted or had their seeds removed are called pitted. This makes it sound like their pits are still in them. So if you're new to dried plums, that's just a pointer for what to look for on the packaging. In Norse mythology, Thiazi, Anglicized as Thiazi, Thjazi, Tjasse, or Thiassi, is a member of the Jötunn et, or an et is like a it's a kinship group, like a clan or a tribe or a nation. In skaldic poetry, there are hints that Thiazi may have an allegiance to the Jötunn et through his mother, while his father, named Ölvaldi, also known as Audvaldi and perhaps Ivaldi, may have been from the Alfar et. And the Alfar are what is often translated into English as elves, and the Jötunn are often translated into English as giants. So this Thjazi is the father of Skaði, and Skaði is a goddess. She's the goddess that is going to be honored, in fact, in 2018 at the Hail and Horn Gathering. For various reasons, Thiazi is displeased with his interactions with the Æsir et and abducts the goddess Iðunn, also called Iduna. And he did this abduction by turning her into a hazelnut. Because they no longer have the apples of immortality, which Iðunn is the keeper of, the gods begin to age, and eventually they will die. So, but after a number of things that occur in this myth, eventually they reclaim Iðunn and kill Thiazi. Now, the death of Thiazi sends his daughter Skaði on the warpath. Due to her intensity and her resolve, and maybe perhaps her kin connections, the gods decide to provide her with compensation in lieu of war. This kind of compensation was called vergeld in Old Norse. As part of this payment, the god Thor sets Thiazi's eyes as stars in the sky. Now, most scholars believe that those stars are Castor and Pollux in the Gemini constellation. This dish that I'm making is inspired by those eyes in the sky. So, Thiazi's eyes. This is a very, very simple recipe. It's going to be a short video this week. Have here hazelnuts. Now, you saw earlier how I put them in the oven and took the skins off of them. And we have here just plums. Now, the interesting thing about this recipe is both of these ingredients, they were found in Northern Europe. So plums, obviously, in Denmark, etc. Doesn't go very far north, but we have hazelnuts as well, which are fairly wide. But this recipe is essentially the same kind of recipe they have in the Middle East. It's a very simple one where they stuff a nut in a date. So it's usually almonds or something like that. It's a little snack. And I just took that concept and put it to Northern European ingredients.
That's
here.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to be doing. And one of the cool things, one of the reasons I did that was because Thiazi is a giant, a Jötunn, and his daughter is Skaði, and she's the one we're honoring at the feast where this is going to be served. But the giants are like the representative of the outsider, the foreigner. And so in Norse mythology, or over history, oftentimes people who were the Finns or the Samis were acquainted to the outsider. But in modern days, one of the groups that is often an immigrant to the north as well are people from the Middle East or people from Islamic areas. But the Vikings actually had contact with people from those areas too. Like the Osberg ship, one of the women who was buried there, she was from Persia. She was born in Persia. They could tell from the isotopic analysis. And also too in Denmark, in Hedeby, this town, one of the graves was a man who was born in the vicinity of Baghdad.
Interesting.
Yeah, so there's a long-term cultural contact. And one of the things Norse mythology tells us is that there can be conflicts between the Jötunn and the gods, but they are the same quality of being. They are the same, and they can marry, and they can have peace. And so Skaði, she actually comes from the giant clan and becomes one of the gods, but she's from a different tribe. And so there's this there can be a conflict with the other or the foreigner, but one of the things that Norse mythology and modern heathens often focus on, especially ones who are more open and progressive, is the fact that our religious belief can result in the creation of peace and creation of bonds between peoples who may have different cultural backgrounds, may have different belief systems.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, is there something mythologically symbolic to the ingesting of the other?
There isn't directly, but there are examples of a folkloric belief of swallowing of flies and so on, shapeshifters and so on. A lot of those stories come from Celtic mythology, obviously, and they may have gotten into some of the folklore of the Nordic areas through contact with the Celtic peoples. There is the ingestion of the blood of Kvasir, so the mead is actually acquainted to the blood of a god. And so that is something that when you take in alcohol, and any alcohol or inspiration, poetic inspiration, etc., is often likened to that. So that's that sort of artistic or religious ecstasy or just joy of life oftentimes is acquainted to things that you consume, which are godly.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, but I'm sure there's lots more that you can think of. If anybody can think of an interesting Viking age or heathen mythological example of eating something, bringing it into you, as Shami mentioned, put it down in the comments. So, and I guess we haven't introduced you yet. So would you
I'm
like
Shami. Nice to meet you.
I'm sorry. We filmed 2 videos on the same day, and we introduced her in the other video. So
It's okay. I drink wine and I enjoy cooking.
So this is super easy. All we have are these 2 ingredients. So what you do is you just take one of the prunes here, and there should be a hole where they took out the pits. And we have giant chopsticks to make the hole a bit bigger if you'd like. And then what we're going to do is take one of our skinned hazelnuts. You take the darker ones and you stick it down inside and try to keep the white side out. Okay, so it looks like this. I'm not sure how good it is. We'll do a close-up later. Wow. So you put them side by side. They look like eyes. That's right.
Very neat.
So I'll put them on the plates and just do a bunch of them.
You know, I could see myself doing something like this with interesting things like nuts, but adding, some hot peppers or some olives even.
Oh yeah.
All kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just it's a common cooking technique to stuff vegetables or fruits. Obviously, we have in Northern Europe. There's the common stuffed apple, like the cooked apple is a common dish. Like I mentioned, there's the dessert dish in the Middle East, but also in around the Mediterranean, stuffed vegetables are extremely common, like in either Greece or Turkey or Italy. You have stuffed eggplants and so on.
Oops, I'm making a mess.
Yeah, these are like the prunes are fairly inexpensive ingredients, and they're sticky. Yeah, one of the things is like if sometimes the prunes are not dried all that well. So what you want to get is a prune that's very well dried, and some of them might be very large, so you might be able to fit 2 nuts in them. And then you just sort of form it around so that it maintains itself. Yeah, and if they are too dry, if you have a food dehydrator, what you can do is put them in the food dehydrator for a while and just dry them out. Or if you don't have a food dehydrator, just stick them in the oven at one of your lowest settings and crack the door. And then it'll dry the fruit more and it'll make it more workable. But it should be sticky because there's quite a lot of sugar in prunes.
I confirm it, they're sticky.
Yeah. And I'm going to, at some point in this video, I'm going to tell a little bit more about the myth of Thiazi. So you might have heard it already, or might hear it later. But the reason I picked these two colors too is because in the myth, the gods, in order to appease Skaði, they've killed her father. So what they do is they take his eyes and throw them up into the night sky, and they become a system of stars. And so that's why we have the plum with the prunes, which are black, and we have the white hazelnut. So we have it's almost like a star on a field.
That's a neat concept. Can't find my hole.
And when we at Hail and Horn Gathering, we do a lot of the cooking communally. So this is one that'll be easy to do when you're camping, and you know, kids can get involved and stuff, and actually gets them to eat prunes. You know.
That's a good idea. Yeah, keeps you regular.
Yeah, for some reason, like, prunes get this bad rap. Like, when it's a plum, everyone's like, oh, delicious, juicy plum. And then you let it dry, and then it gets this, like, has this terrible PR. I don't know what the deal is. Like,
I make a similar recipe that involves jalapeno, cream cheese, and bacon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'd grill it.
Oh,
yeah.
Over the fire.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, these taste, I've made the ones with dates before, and they taste good warmed up, actually. With the dates and almonds. And of course, because these are already dried fruits and dried nuts, this keep for a long time. Yeah. So you can make these and they'll put them in the fridge because they will, the nuts will absorb liquid from a little bit of liquid from the fruit, but not too much, so you can keep them for maybe a week or so and just have them as snacks, super healthy snacks whenever you feel like it.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
There we go. Plate full of eyeballs.
Plate full of eyeballs. Wizened.
Great for Halloween as well.
Yeah, it's true. It could be a Halloween thing. Yeah, they're a little creepy. Okay, so now's the time to taste one.
Try one?
Yeah.
Okay, I've got my glass of wine here. That's very nice.
It's definitely a great texture. I really like the crunch and the softness. You have to like prunes though. There is the dominant taste of prunes, and the thing about hazelnuts is they're one of the more bitter nuts. Hazel and Brazil nuts. So one of the things about this too is that it's like food didn't used to be as sweet. This would have been about as sweet as food got.
That's very true.
Right? In Northern Europe, like, dates are ridiculously sweet, and they didn't really have those. And so this would have been super, super sweet at the time. Also, our vegetables and so on, they've been bred to be sweeter. So most vegetables used to be more bitter. So this dish actually has a characteristic and a flavor profile that is probably a lot more like an ancient flavor profile.
That's very interesting. You see, with my North American palate, I'm saying, you know what? Behind that nut, I would put a little piece of chocolate or some coconut or some...
Or candy the nuts first, right?
Yeah, absolutely, right? Candy the nuts or roast them or something, and then, you know, add some interesting flavors.
Yeah, but you could do that, or you could just have it like this, because this, you know, could have been made like this. We have no idea. One of the problems with the Viking Age is that a lot of, you know what ingredients were used in an area, but you don't know how they were combined. And sometimes you can look at historic recipes, but they're from hundreds of years later, and there's lots of other cultural influences. And who knows what the you know, maybe there was a trend in a certain area for a certain kind of food or dish or something, and we just don't know that. So
yeah, and chances are you would have had also, you know, cooking is often passed down through families. So even within a certain area, you know, you'd have certain family, you know, recipes or things that were passed down generationally.
Yeah. So imagine someone who there was an immigrant, or there was a thrall or somebody who was from an area where they had dates and nuts, and they're like, oh, I wish I had dates and nuts. Well, the closest thing I got is prunes and hazelnuts, so let's go for it. And then, you know, somebody maybe liked it, or who knows. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, cheers and skull, and thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll see you on another episode of Heathen Hearth.
Bye.